There is no doubt that cloud is being adopted. It will continue to be adopted. All of your organizations are adopting cloud, whether you want them to, whether you're aware that they are. Cloud is being adopted. Cloud services are being consumed, and that will continue to grow. So understanding how best to manage, control, and leverage that adoption is really the key challenge for us. So just briefly, I use this slide quite a bit because I find it's really valuable just to set the stage around where cloud fits, because it's part of a broader context. And one of the nice things about being an industry analyst is we go through these phases. Every 5-7 years we seem to change. We go through periods of massive innovation, followed by periods of let's call it digestion, for lack of a better word, where we try and consolidate everything that we've invested in. We're now clearly moving into a period of massive innovation. And Steve mentioned some of those, as did Dave. There's the sexy, high-profile areas like mobility, consumerization, social computing. But there's also those less sexy, less glamorous, internally focused innovation areas like virtualization, like the ongoing commoditization and standardization of hardware and servers. And underlying all of this, everything we're talking about, is basic connectivity, broadband access. These are all critical, and they're not mutually dependent, but they are mutually supportive. They drive each other, and they fuel each other. And we'll hear more about this after my presentation from Dave. Second key point is that the innovation is moving. Organizations are not focused on improving back-office processes. Leading organizations have done that, and that is now a continuous process that they do. But the real innovation is happening at the edges, as we say. So where Steve talked about big data, for instance, as a perfect example, all that really means is leveraging information generated by many of these innovations, like mobility, like consumerization, with the understanding and the acceptance that that data currently and will forever reside outside the organization. But you still need to leverage it for innovation, for competitive differentiation. We need to better understand our customers, for instance, so we need to know what they're saying on social networking sites, as an example. Third key point is how these trends are impacting decision-making within the organization. Certainly there's the demographic shifts that we're all very familiar with in terms of usage of technology, but also not even among demographics. I'm just talking about the change in who is influencing IT decisions. And I'm talking about the business now and their ability to source the services they need, either from IT, optimally from IT, or elsewhere. If IT cannot provide what's required, they will source that. That's having a significant impact on the organization, on who controls the decision making, who has the power, the influence within the organization. And finally, it's basic economics. If you want to understand any IT market, understand the economics, and cloud is no different. It's all about pay as you go, an as a service model. One of the good things about the cloud market, the cloud industry, from an economic standpoint, is there's improved transparency. With transparency, particularly in the economics of how we pay for services, with transparency comes improved efficiency, improved competitive landscape, which helps us as consumers because it actually drives a more efficient market. So from a CIO perspective, what are we talking about? Well, there's kind of two realities. One, it's the business use of technology is continuously increasing. And two, user expectations around technology are increasing. Now, look, this isn't new. I know this isn't new. Go back over the past 40, 50 years. Use of IT within the business has continually grown. Expectations for users has continually grown. What's new is an acceleration in the rate of change. It's increased dramatically. and it will continue to increase dramatically. And the reality that we all live and breathe from the IT standpoint is that IT budgets don't change anywhere near as quickly. And they're not going to. It's just the way it is. So how do we deal with this? Because the current approach to provisioning services and supporting our users isn't enough. As these changes accelerate, and they will continue to, we need new approaches. So cloud is not the answer, it's part of the answer. It's one of the approaches that organizations are using to help overcome or at least begin to meet some of these challenges they're seeing. So here are some adoption numbers, and I've circled Australia here. So Forrester Research, what we do annually, we survey organizations, a combination of IT and business decision makers across the region. And in this case, it's over 500 organizations that we speak to understand their adoption trends, their concerns, their initiatives, their priorities around cloud. And in this case, you can see the results there for Australia. So currently, and we completed this in late Q3 of last year. So approximately 62% of organizations in Australia are either currently leveraging or actively planning to leverage cloud. Now, Australia has, for the last 3 years, been about 10 points higher than the regional average. So 12 months ago, it stood at about 52%, about half of organizations. 12 months before that, it was around 35%. So it's continuing to grow, and it will continue to grow. What I thought was even more interesting, though, was this slide, and these results are specifically for Australia. See the top number there, 74% of Australian organizations are seeking approaches to centralized procurement and management of services through IT. That doesn't mean they're there yet. That's the objective. But at the same time, you see at the bottom, a third of organizations still have no formal strategy for cloud. Now, cloud is not one thing. We know this, but unfortunately, the only way to graphically represent it is with a really messy slide. So that's what this is. This is Forrester's Cloud Taxonomy. This is an overview of cloud-based services. And the easiest way to understand this taxonomy is based on the axes. So the vertical axis, from private cloud through to public cloud, it's all based on the level of sharing. Private cloud at the bottom, that's your data center. You may share across divisions or units within the company, but it's your data center. Virtual private cloud is hosted off-site, but the level of sharing is still controlled, still limited, still defined. And the top is public cloud, where the infrastructure is off-site and you share that data center or those data center resources with many customers. The key difference between public cloud and virtual private is only two differences. One, as a consumer, you know where the data center is, you know where and how your data is stored. And two, you have some control over how you access that data, how you access the service, either through a dedicated line or through a virtual private network. Whereas a public cloud, you have no control, ultimately, over where the data is stored, no real control over how you access those services. And I think that's interesting, particularly in Australia, because if we look at the numbers overall, there's a heavy focus, and Steve even mentioned it, on infrastructure as a service. AWS has done a fantastic job of building a presence, building demand for infrastructure as a service. But what we're seeing and what we expect over the next 2 to 3 years is far stronger growth around dynamic infrastructure services, which is simply infrastructure as a service over a virtual private cloud. And the reason is very simple. People want more control. They will still access infrastructure as a service when and where they need it opportunistically. That market will continue to grow, but we're going to see far stronger demand for more controlled access to services and far greater demand for dynamic infrastructure services as a market.